Brilliance Audio presents Work, Mate, Marry, Love, How Machines Shape Our Human Destiny by Debora L. Spar. Performed by Tanya Eby. Standing as we do today in an era of artificial intelligence, space flights, and life-altering pharmaceuticals, we find it difficult to comprehend the power of the world's first technological revolution, or to understand how deeply society was shattered and then restructured by the invention of very basic tools. It's hard even to think of the plow and the hoe as technology, given their simple, almost intuitive shapes and functions. The hoe, after all, is little more than a handled pole attached perpendicularly to a blade. The plow, as it appears in various incarnations around the world, is essentially a large digging stick, dragged by a pair of oxen or water buffalo. Yet together they changed the world and the ways in which human beings lived in it. We will never know who created these tools or how they eventually swept across the globe. Between 9,500 and 8,500 BC, however, agricultural practices in the hill country of southeastern Turkey, western Iran, and the eastern coast of the Mediterranean began to change, slowly at first, and then with a rapidly increasing velocity. Humans, who by this point had lived as nomads for tens of thousands of years, started to become more sedentary, forsaking foraging for farming and learning to domesticate both animals and crops. Initially, they focused on the resources around them, on the sheep and goats that already graced their hills, for example, and the olives and grapes that naturally grew there. As they began to understand the process of cultivation, though, the settlers developed tools to encourage and expand it. Hoes, first, to stir up the soil and embed the seeds, then plows to create larger and more productive fields, and irrigation channels to keep them watered. With these tools, settlers became farmers, growing crops such as wheat or rice consciously now, and with an efficiency that increased over time. This ability to control nature's bounty, rather than just searching for it, was the first major step that humans took toward technological mastery. The step that gave us as a species the unprecedented capacity to rule and shape and perhaps destroy the planet. In the process, though, it also made us settle down. Because once Neolithic nomads learned to farm and to depend on farming to provide the bulk of their foodstuffs, they had to stay by these farms, tending to the crops and watching them grow. This was the move, dominated by agriculture, enabled by technology, that changed the very nature of human society. Because once the production of food was truly a production, it demanded a certain set of social and economic relationships around it. Most basically, it demanded permanent settlement, a dwelling for the farmer to live in, and a safe place in which to store his tools and harvest. Producing food also required a new and wider range of implements. Foragers need little more than a container in which to carry their haul. Hunters, even big game hunters, need only a weapon and a means of cutting and cleaning their prey. Farmers, by comparison, need stuff. Not just hoes and plows, but also blade sharpeners and draft animals, granaries and seed storage bins, mortars to crack open the tough grains, and pots in which to cook them. No wonder, then, that archaeological remains from early agricultural societies, regardless of where they occur, are so rich in remnants. Post-herds, hoe blades, urns, and water jugs and baskets all became necessary to support an increasingly permanent, agriculturally dependent society. This growth of goods, in turn, meant that people suddenly needed to protect their goods, to define what was theirs and keep it in their possession. Before this move, when life was communal and individuals generally lived on the food they could find with the tools they could carry, property made no sense. People had few goods. They moved from place to place. But once they settled down, once they needed things, once they started to produce, men and women needed to control their possessions and make them theirs. As the economic historians Douglas North and Robert Paul Thomas wrote in an influential 1977 essay, it is inconceivable that, from the very beginning, the first farmers did not exclude outsiders from sharing the fruits of their labor. And thus, private property was eventually born. It's not intuitively obvious that gender roles would change as a result of technology and property. or that men and women in agricultural societies would rearrange their relations, economic, sexual, and familial, in such radical fashion. Yet they did, transforming life and love for the next 10,000 years.